Hey, if you're like most people, you're probably wishing that you could learn specific tips and techniques that you can use in order to win your next debate, your next argument, or your next challenging conversation. My name is Jamie Turner. I'm in front of El Capitan here in Yosemite National Park. I'm going to show you 7 different things that you can do to make sure you win your next argument. Let's do this. Hey, my name is Jamie Turner. You may have read one of my books or seen me on TV, but the number one thing I love to do is to help people like you learn how to improve their careers and learn how to discover a better version of themselves. I'm in front of Bridal Veil Falls here in Yosemite National Park in the United States of America. Tip number 1 for you on how to win an argument. Here's the secret. Don't assume that logic is going to win your argument. Here's what I mean by that. Most people believe things for emotional reasons. So if you purely use logic to try to win an argument, you're not really going to win that. There are a bunch of other things that you can do to win the argument. Logic is important, but it's not the critical thing because, as I mentioned, people don't base beliefs on logic. They base it on emotions, and you have to build a bridge in order to make their emotions shift to the point of view that you want. Let's go on to tip number 2. All right, let's talk about tip number 2. Before I dive in, behind me is Yosemite Falls. I climbed up to the top of that when I was younger in much better shape and spent the night at the very top of those waterfalls out there. Bears everywhere, so I was glad I made it. Hey, here's tip number 2 for you. This is gonna be counterintuitive, but it's true. The best way to win an argument is to have no point of view. What do I mean by that? Here's what I mean. If you enter into an argument or a debate or any sort of tough conversation, balls to the walls with big, huge points of view and arguments and how you're smarter and better, you're just gonna have the person you're dealing with put up walls and they aren't gonna budge. The best way to do it is to walk into it and start, as I mentioned before, by building a bridge. You do that by having no point of view and saying, hey, look, we both want to find out what the truth is here. Let's talk about the facts behind this and move into this and think through things and see if we can't arrive at a mutually beneficial conclusion on all this. So, tip number 2, don't have a point of view. Sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Let's go on to tip number 3. Okay, we're still here in beautiful Yosemite Valley. Tip number 3 is to build a bridge to commonality. What do I mean by that? What I mean is start out by making sure that you start with something that you have in common. It doesn't matter what you're debating about, what you're having a conversation about. Start with something that you have in common that you can both agree to. If you start there and work from there, you'll have much more success in the long run to win the argument or win the debate or win the heated conversation that you're having. So remember, tip number 3, build a bridge to commonality by finding something that you both agree on, and then start exploring the debate from there. Let's go to tip number 4. All right, tip number 4, which is actually very appropriate for here at Yosemite National Park, is lead with humility. Again, this is another counterintuitive idea, but if you lead with humility as opposed to arrogance, you'll find that the person you're talking to is much more likely to lower their guard down and listen to you a little more closely. So early on in the debate, the dialogue, the conversation, learn something new that they say and acknowledge that that's a piece of data that you didn't know before by leading with humility and saying, oh, wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting. I'll have to take that into consideration. They let their guard down because they know you're doing the same thing too. So tip number 4, lead with humility. Let's move on to tip number 5. Tip number 5 is to acknowledge their feelings. Again, your intent when having a debate or trying to win an argument is to build that bridge. So with tip number 5, acknowledge how they feel about something. Say something along the lines of, I guess that would really make you feel frustrated, or I understand that would make you feel hurt. Whatever it is, by acknowledging their feelings, you're building that bridge that we're talking about, which will help you ultimately win the debate. All right, tip number 6, and this builds on tip number 5. Tip number 6 is to agree with something they say. When you do that, you build that bridge to commonality that I was talking about, where suddenly they realize that you're agreeing with something they say and they bring their wall down, which makes them more open to the ideas that you're presenting to them. So tip number 6, agree with something they say. Okay, let's do tip number 7 with beautiful Half Dome right behind me here in Yosemite National Park. Tip number 7 is this: Be realistic about your expectations in terms of changing somebody's point of view. People with deeply held points of view are unlikely to change those deeply held points of view on the spot. Now, if you're having a business debate about whether we should create green widgets or red widgets, that's something that you can build a bridge and ultimately convince somebody on the spot. But if you're talking to somebody about personal beliefs, the odds of changing their point of view right away, be realistic about that because the odds are pretty low. But you can plant a seed for them to change their point of view in the future. Now, I hope this was helpful to you. My name is Jamie Turner. I'm an author, a professor, and a workshop leader. If you liked what you saw today, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the link in the description where you can download my free Unspoken Rules of Leadership workbook, which will be perfect for you. My name again is Jamie Turner, and I'll catch you next time.